Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We have a very special guest, Kristin Jordan. She's running for District 9 in New York City, and I know we have people from all over the nation here. And I wanted to put this together just to kind of really help people see, like, it's very important to get involved with state and local offices and elections. I think that gets lost in the sauce with, like, presidential coming up, and then, like, there's other stuff happening all around us, and this gets lost of, looking into who needs to be elected, right? And who would be the best fit. So I wanted to do this just for everyone to know, like, hey, look in the calendar, find out when you need to vote, get that situated, mark it on your calendars, make it an important thing. That's why I wanted to do this. And you're the perfect person, Kristin, because I remember when I first met you, when I first saw you actually was, I don't know if you remember this is probably back in like June. And you stood up, we were doing a march. And before we did the march, you stood up and you were talking. What you said really resonated with me because it just made me think, okay, wait a minute, this isn't like, because in my mind, when I think of people running and like politicians and all these people, I just think that they're not approachable. And I feel like you're more than approachable. I've approached you different occasions and asked questions and, did this and that. And we've done things together. We've thrown trash out at the park together. So I feel like you're very approachable. And I felt like, hey, like, she's the perfect person for people to see and see, hey, like, people, that are running can be approachable and are approachable, right? So I definitely wanted to do this show just for that. And thank you again for everyone joining. Mike, Ken, my mom, Renee, Arian, and Will. Again, thank you for joining. And Kristin, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate our connecting. I try to be approachable, so I'm glad to hear that feedback. I think that we in general need our leaders to be accessible. I think there's way too much of a rift between the leadership, the elected leaders, and the people they serve. So I'm really on a mission to break that down and to connect as much as possible with the people in my district and actually do those things like a park cleanup with the local constituents. Now, at the same time that we did the park cleanup, I also gave my rant about New York sanitation and the cut of $106 million to the sanitation budget, while at the same time still funding NYPD and funding a $10 billion jails expansion, right? And I think this is some of the work that needs to be done at the local level. And I do understand why people pay attention nationally. That is important. But I also think that some of the things, especially recently, some of the things that we've been talking about are really local issues, right? So take, for example, police accountability. That is going to be a local issue.
Yeah.
And in fact, part of the reason I ran for city council was because this is the level where I could do something about police accountability.
Yeah.
And I have been an activist for a long time. Even before George Floyd, there were already too many names, and I had been involved already in Black Lives Matter movement. And when I was looking at different levels of government and saying, we need community control of policing. We need a community board that can fire and suspend the local police. This is something that I propose, but I won't take full credit for it because it's something activists have put forward for quite some time. But to have an elected civilian review board here in New York, and to have that board be able to fire and suspend police instead of right now, the board can only recommend things. It's still on the police commissioner. It's still on the police to police themselves. We've seen that doesn't work. So one of the things that I wanted to do was get a board like that set up. That's city council level. You can't actually do it at the national level. In fact, if you heard Barack Obama's statement on the matter of policing, he actually said the place where we can really address police accountability is going to be at the local and state levels. So I think it's worth looking at whoever is running in your area to see what is going to be their stance around police accountability, especially right now. And that's a big issue for me. A lot of the other things like housing, right? We start talking about gentrification or the effects of housing, the prices of rent. All of that is also going to be local, because when we're talking about how do we regulate landlords, do we have Section 8 and rent stabilized housing and affordable housing? These are things happening at the state and local levels. And the sad truth is, it's definitely true for New York. I believe it's probably true for other places. But the sad truth is that a lot of real estate and developers are also mixed up in these local elections and supporting electeds who are, frankly, then going to okay the real estate and the developers, right? So they're financing their campaigns. The electeds are green lighting the development and not regulating real estate. So. And so one of the things I want to do is regulate landlords. Highly regulate them. And I speak very openly. As you can imagine, I don't have much landlord support. But I speak very openly about needing to highly regulate, particularly the big landlords. I mean, there's something to be said if for smaller landlords and you have a mortgage and making sure we have equity there, but like particularly the big ones, which we have quite a few of here in New York, making sure they're highly regulated.
Definitely. That's all good stuff, and that's all needed for sure. And on every state has an issue with housing and like we all have that issue, right?
And a lot of it is connected to us not being tuned into our local elections. And, you know, I'm not going to blame the people because it's by design, right? Especially for Black and Brown communities, it's done by design. We're purposely kept in the dark. We're purposely not told about whatever is going on in the local level. People don't understand the language of the bills. People don't understand whatever is getting passed recently, again, by design and on purpose. So I'm not going to blame the people. But I do think part of tapping into our power and fighting back is, despite the fact that they don't want you to know, starting to know.
Definitely. So this is the time right now for a Q&A. So if anybody wants to jump in and ask a question, just go ahead and fire out, because I have plenty of questions. So I'll go first, and then if you guys want to jump in and ask a question for Kristin, you're more than welcome. So one of the questions I had, Kristin, was what was one of the biggest hurdles running for District 9?
Oh, well, the biggest hurdle, and I'm still facing it because the election is in June of 2021. But the biggest hurdle is visibility, you know, and when you do a national campaign, there's a lot of visibility. But when you do a local campaign, especially if you're not taking corporate donors, which I'm not, and you're not doing the special interest money, then you have to, you need that grassroots effort, and that takes time to build up. And so I would say the biggest challenge is just getting out there and then having the resources to get out there. And, you know, even like the printing of, I was griping today, even the printing of posters and flyers. It's like, how did we spend $300 on flyers? But it's I mean, you know, printing costs, you know, costs. So I would say the biggest challenge is that, like, visibility and getting out there and resources. I would also say there was a lot of pushback and discouragement when I first got interested in running. I'm 33 years old. I am third generation Harlem, and I know, so I know a lot about the neighborhood. I'm from here, my family's from here. I'm very interested in the politics and making it better.
Yeah.
But a lot of the feedback I received was, oh, you're too young, you need to camp out for 10, 20 years on
Wow.
community board or something else before you run for city council. But
Interesting.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I push back on that. You know, 33 is a real age. I understand I look young, black don't crack, you know. But I actually think if we have some newer, younger voices and some fresh perspective, I think we will see some of these changes that we want to see. You know, the old guard has had their time, and there's been the same people camped out for 10, 20 years in the same seats.
Yeah.
You know, it's time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? You can either press low hand or raise your hand. Or Rob, do you have a question? Because you have your hand
Yes,
up.
I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm sorry I got in late again, but I have a question. I just want to know, like, I jump in late. Which school you went to? What's your experience that you trying to do as you're being a city council? What is your area where you trying to help in, and what you gonna do if you do win as a city council, and what will you do to impact and improve the community?
Gotcha.
Okay, I love that. There were a few questions there. So I'll start at the beginning, which I believe was about the school I attended. So I went to Brown University. There I did a double major in Black Studies and Literary Arts. The Black Studies program there is called Africana. It has a very political and socio-political lens. So I did learn a lot about American politics. And then the literary arts department was all about writing, and I am an author. I've authored 2 books. I've also done poetry workshops, and so I'm very into words and the literature as well. So needless to say, I've actually read some of the local laws, which unfortunately is more than can be said for some of our local politicians. It's very unfortunate, but it is true, because we have legislative aides and people who are not actually the elected reading and writing things. So I think what qualifies me is that I do have a high education experience. I am very literate, and I am tuned into what is happening politically. I've also been an activist and a teacher and an organizer for 10 years. So I founded a Harlem Cot Watch team. I was involved in Black Lives Matter, also Occupy Wall Street, and Poccupy, which was a people of color effort to not only have the Occupy Wall Street movement, but to actually talk about what could be done to develop local communities like Harlem. The second part of your question, which was about what would I do, I have a 7 area focus. So I won't go super deep into each one, because I can, it will take a long time. But my political platform spells out Harlem, and the H stands for holding police accountable, and the A stands for actually affordable housing. R is redistribution of wealth and resources. L is living longer, which is a care package for Harlem seniors. E is education for all and environmental justice, and M is meaningful change. And so it spells out Harlem, and then within each of those I have different platform points, but in general I'm for universal rent control and rent stabilization, and for police accountability with an elected civilian review board, and for retooling education, particularly funding for the local schools. So,
Okay. All right, that's very awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right, I have a question, follow-up question from what you just said. education for all, and I know, and being a teacher, you know, creating equity is very important to me, working in a charter school. So what does that mean, education for all, for those who might not understand what that means?
So I think what it means is that right now we have two-tier education, right? We have those who are getting a higher quality of education than others.
Mm-hmm.
And it sets people up to fail. I mean, we are continually setting the kids up to fail, especially a lot of our children, again, a lot of Black and brown children, because and children from areas like Central Harlem, because the schools simply don't have the same amount of resources. They simply don't have the same student to teacher ratio. The kids get the same amount of attention. There's a way of funding the schools that is literally punishing the students. It's literally punishing the school and the students when they don't do well. So then funding gets pulled. So then they do worse, you know? So we actually have to retool how we're funding schools, make sure that we're getting the schools what they need. I think in terms of charter schools, the initial vision and mission behind charter schools was to set up programs and set up things that could then be implemented system-wide in public schools. So I would like to see us really return to that mission. I think that has gotten lost sometimes in ways where the charter school gets set up and the new way is tried, but we haven't actually implemented it back into the system to help the public schools. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Mike, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot I was on mute. So hi, nice to meet you. My name is Mike. I'm originally from New York, but I live now in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think what you said about other cities facing the same kind of issues, I see that a lot down here. Charlotte is actually ranked as among big cities in the country, the worst upward mobility for people of color. So basically, if you're born in Charlotte poor, you'll die poor, most likely. So I've been trying to work in that area here and, you know, try and do whatever I can to help improve those outcomes for people. But anyway, my question for you has to do with politics, kinda, or political spectrum. I agree with everything you're saying and I read your platform, I went to your website, I subscribed to your emails and stuff, and I've been reading a lot about you. And my question, I guess, is you're pretty far to the left, which is where I am. And I wonder, in Harlem, is that something that people are gravitating towards? Are those kinds of you know, further left ideas that you have, things that are catching on, or are you seeing any kind of opposition to that? And also with your opponents, I'm not sure exactly how the city council elections work, but if there are primaries, are there, you know, people who are, you know, don't quite have the same ideas as you? And then I guess in a general election sense, again, I'm not sure how it works. I don't even know if the party matters, but I guess just in terms of political philosophies, is your political philosophy popular in Harlem? And are the people who you're kind of going up against, are they in the same kind of area, or, you know, are they not? Are you kind of on your own in that further to the left area?
So good questions. I want to start by saying I definitely applaud your work. I mean, trying to disrupt like what is a lack of upward mobility. There's no way that's an easy job. So I definitely applaud that. I will say that politically, I am to the left of everyone else running. The truth of the matter is that it's time for bold, radical ideas. So I speak very openly about that. I do think that Harlem, the people are ready. The question is the establishment ready? And no, they're not. They're not ready. And they are very used to doing things a certain way. There is a Harlem machine. There's a way that things have run for several decades. You know, there are people who have been in power, like their current electeds or incumbents, again, for several decades. And I am running in a seat that is not open, so there is an incumbent. It is unclear if he's going to run again, but I think we should assume he will, because despite some of the rumors, he himself has said that he is going to run. So despite what others might be rumbling about, the person has said he's running. And the other piece of it is that he isn't declared yet, but he doesn't have to declare early because he's an incumbent. So he's already well known. He can declare late and run and win. And in fact, that's exactly what he did in 2017. He declared at the very end and ran and won, you know. So I'm operating under the assumption that the incumbent is running, and I am a challenger to him. I do, like I said, I do believe that Harlem, the people are ready. What has happened in this district is that there has been a lack of involvement, again, on purpose, in the local elections. So we have, like, the last primary in this district, there was not even 10% of the people who went out to vote, which is unfortunately common in our local elections. This is what I'm saying about we have to figure out how to plug into what's happening locally, because when you have not even 10% of the people voting, right, the fact is Harlem has not spoken. That's the fact. Like, the actual community has not spoken because you do not have people going out to vote. Now, there are people who look at that and feel very discouraged because they say, oh, well, if less than 10% voted, then you're not really going to get anywhere, especially if you have really bold and radical ideas. People aren't going to take to that. But I actually see it as the opposite. I see it as you only had 10% voting because there wasn't a candidate running who inspired people enough to go and vote. But if there is someone running who is offering something different, I do believe people will go out and vote. You know, they want to vote for something that actually matters. They're not doing it because they don't feel like it matters, you know? So I have a lot of faith in the people of Harlem to embrace the change and embrace the radical ideas. I think there are people who are going to be in opposition. Absolutely. I've already talked with them. You know, it's like, hey, I see you, you see me. But I think most of the people who I speak to who are from the community, like, not political heads, not strategists, not people who have run campaigns before and are in, you know, the little policy bubbles and stuff. The actual people from the block, when I talk to them, they're excited and they like the ideas that I'm talking about. And I've already had several people who have said, oh, I got to figure out how to register so I could vote for you, you know? And so that's what I'm hoping to see is less about like trying to convince people who, you know, aren't going to be so into it, and more about engaging people who right now don't feel like the change is possible.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have Will. Will, you have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourself. All right.
Hey, what's going on, Kristin?
Hey.
My name is William. First off, before I start, I'm very happy that you are running. I definitely do believe, especially in Harlem, that there needs to be new voices and there needs to be new blood within that political ecosystem. And as you just mentioned, you know, previously in your in a lot of your conversations, well, previously in your answers rather, it has definitely had a negative and adverse effect for Harlem and for its constituents. So I do have two questions though. One question is actually stemming from what Mike said, because pretty much he said that you're leaning very much towards the left. And I know, like, in this day and age, there's a lot of, I guess, stigmatism for people who kind of label themselves in a certain, I guess, political spectrum. So what I do want to do, this is my first question, I would like for you to define the difference between socialism and democratic socialism. Because I do believe there is a difference, but a lot of people, they don't understand the difference. I guess let's deal with that first question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I think we have to make a distinction between governing and like how government runs and our economic system, right? So when I say democratic socialist, what I'm saying is that in terms of government and how government runs, I am pro-democracy. And when it comes to how the economics run, our economic system, I am for socialism, in that I'm for putting people before profit, and I'm for redistributing wealth from those who have the most to others who are in need and or most oppressed. So that's the way that I define it. And the reason I would distinguish that from traditional socialism is because I think people's minds go right to, you know, Soviet Russia, or like they go to examples that are very authoritarian and not democratic. So that's why I say democratic socialist, because I do believe in democracy, in a democratic system.
And I guess just to add on, from my understanding, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but to be a democratic socialist, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-capitalist. If my understanding stands, if my understanding is correct, you know, a lot of times, like I said before, when people hear the word socialism, that it tends to throw them off. But you know, they with a lot of times they I guess they choose not to I guess research and just examine what a lot of these terms mean. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say yes. And then I was also going to say we have differences amongst us, right? So I have talked to other democratic socialists. For example, we have the question of reparations. I firmly believe in reparations, but you could talk to others who say, oh, well, you know, that's not particularly socialist. I would say, well, it's absolutely redistributing wealth to those who have been previously exploited.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell me that Black people are not the proletariat. We are absolutely the proletariat. Okay. So the conversation, especially when you get to race, I think needs to go deeper. And I think it's not easily placed in like capitalist, anti-capitalist. It's more, how are we restructuring society in a way that puts people first? And I think like when it comes to, for example, small Black-owned businesses, I'm quite capitalist in the sense that I think we should give grants to those businesses. So grants, not loans, because the loans continue to put people in debt. But grants to the businesses that have been exploited in the past and have received the least. And in New York, we have 22% of the population is Black, and we own 2% of the small owned businesses. I mean, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So you're not going to tell me that we shouldn't find ways to redistribute wealth in that way. And at the same time, someone else may call that capitalist, because I am talking about funding business, but I am talking about funding business in a way that actually redistributes wealth, if that makes sense. So that
actually makes perfect sense, and I'm happy that you explained that. And I definitely wanted to, give you that opportunity, just to kind of like clarify your position and everything else. My second question, I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from the Bronx. I went to school in Harlem, and I went to Frederick Douglass Academy around 145th and Adam Clayton Boulevard. And the Harlem that I went to school in versus the Harlem that I see now it feels like two completely different places. And I know you during the beginning of the broadcast, you mentioned something about gentrification, and I feel like a lot of the problems with Harlem, in terms of this voices not being heard, is because the neighborhood the neighborhood really is just changing. You have situations where you have I know in the west side of Harlem, they pretty much changed the name from West Harlem to now it's Hamilton Heights. They and they just pretty much changing various names, and just pretty much they're pricing out a lot of just for the most part they're pricing out a lot of the residents that were there. A lot of residents that who were there for like generations and decades and everything. If you're elected, how would you try to stemming what's going on and all, the stemming the gentrification, and just the pretty much is a hostile takeover in terms of the neighborhood. And I just wanted to ask, what was your plan to just kind of to slow that down?
Yeah, I appreciate this question a lot. I do appreciate it a lot. I think that the gentrification in Harlem has been real. I have experienced it literally in my own family. So I'm third generation Harlem. My whole family used to be here. Now my godmother had to move to the Bronx. People had to move to Brooklyn. People who were Harlemites, they were here, but they wanted to stay, and they simply could not afford to. So they were displaced, right? And I think there are a few things we need to do, but one of the big things that I am pushing is for a community rezoning. And I'm gonna break this down a little bit, because I know zoning language gets a little intangible for people, but basically the way it works right now is that Harlem, we're sitting ducks. A developer comes, they make a proposal to rezone and to do something, and it's just those people in whatever apartment building or whatever place that developer is at that are fighting the developer. And they're fighting off a whole developer by themselves, just like one building or one complex. And we wind up being sitting ducks to all these developers who are coming in, and they're just trying to make money. They're not interested in the community. They're not interested in keeping people in their homes or anything else. But with a community rezoning project, and this has been done in other places, we could actually go block by block and rezone our own neighborhood. And the community would decide, okay, this is what we're going to have our community look like. This is where we want the prices of rent to be. This is the height we want buildings to be. This is the amount of green space we want and play space for the kids that we want. And it can be done very democratically. This has been modeled in other districts, but Central Harlem has not done it. And we can see the effects of Central Harlem having not done it. Now, the benefits of the community rezoning is you get everyone involved in this democratic process, and then it's no longer me, individual, with my tenants association fighting off the Olnick Corporation. You know, it's actually the whole community has already decided what we're going to do going forward. So that's the first thing. I would propose community rezoning, which I can actually do at the city council level. So this is something that I would actually have the power to do, which is awesome.
Wow.
The second thing is I would push for universal rent control and rent stabilization. Now that is a much harder fight because for that I would need to get all my colleagues on city council on board.
Yeah, that's
Actually fight
Yeah.
those boards. That's going to be a harder battle.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a battle worth having because we need to, as you said, stem the tide, and we do need rent control and rent stabilization in the city in a much bigger degree because the rent is too high and people can't afford to stay here. It's way too high. And the vast majority of New Yorkers are what's called rent burdened, which means you're paying more than 30% of your income in rent. And so we should set a goal citywide for people to be able to live and pay 30% of their income on rent.
Yeah.
And that is a lofty goal. That one will be a battlefield. But I am willing to fight it. And I think it starts by having someone who says it. Right. So unfortunately, we have a lot of political leaders who are not even willing to say it.
Yeah.
And but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't at least start having the conversation with political leaders who will say, no, we need to do universal rent control and rent stabilization. So that's the second piece. The third thing I will say is that a lot of power does rest with tenants in New York. But tenants, again, on purpose, are not made aware of their power. And so that's another way of combating this that I feel like I could do, which is just the education and the empowerment in a people's place of saying, well, this is actually what you can do. And even it's something as easy as having strong constituent services in my city council office that actually checks the neighborhood and says, okay, what are landlords charging? Here at Lenox Terrace, we wound up with a class action lawsuit because the landlord was illegally overcharging. This is rent stabilized. And the landlord was illegally overcharging people for housing. And this is for me and other tenants. They had to give us all our money back. We won the lawsuit, you know, which is great. But the only reason that we did it was because we were empowered enough to know that it was illegally happening and we could do a lawsuit and we could get that money back. So I would district-wide in my constituent services, make sure I have someone who can lobby on those cases and just tell tenants like, oh, you should bring a lawsuit right now. You should do a class action lawsuit. And unfortunately, you don't have a lot of that going on because again, a lot of the local politicians are intimately connected with the landlords. And in Harlem, we have in Harlem, we have our elected officials, like one of the most prominent ones is a freaking landlord, one of the wealthiest landlords in the city. So it's like they're not going to do that because they're making money.
Yeah.
And that's the part I want the community to see and to know. And that's what I'm going to openly talk about is that when we look around at Harlem and we say gentrification, we need to also look at our elected officials who knew it was coming and did nothing to prevent it and who have not stood up to actually protect the community.
I honestly believe I noticed it during the Bloomberg era, and it just became more it's like he pretty much just served Harlem up on a platter, and it was just like, just carve it up, we're just gonna price everybody out, And it's really, it is extremely unfair for for the middle class working
Mhm.
residents who were living there for generations, and it's just for them just to be priced out of their homes or just priced out of their apartments. It's incredible. And it was just it's really, I mean, there's a lot of things I could really say about it. Even so much like you're talking, it was it is rather a cultural hub for for Black America.
Yeah.
And that's another in a sense, it's almost being attacked. So
It is. I mean, when you're saying hostile takeover, you're not kidding. It is being attacked. And I appreciate you citing Harlem in this way because Harlem is known nationwide as this Black USA, or one of the cultural hubs, all this history and legacy. And we shouldn't let it just be taken. At the very, very least, we should not go quietly. We should fight back.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Will, for that. Anyone else have a question? I have one last question before. Okay. Let's go with Ken.
So forgive me, being in Texas, I don't know exactly how your education system is funded. Here in Texas, we fund our education with property taxes, which there is a big argument. And one thing that we've seen here is our home values are skyrocketing, and they use these loopholes. For instance, our home value went up, I think it was almost 30%. It's supposed to be limited at 10% increases per year, but they say that it's 10% per year until you reach market value. So not knowing how your education system is funded, one of the solutions I believe to all of these issues that we're discussing is education. If we can keep children in school, if we can educate them well, if we could get them through, high school is no longer the pinnacle of education. You must have at least an associate's degree, if not a bachelor's. And sometimes, at least I know my field, psychology, that's not even purposeful, that doesn't even have a purpose. So when you start talking about gentrification, those property values increase your property taxes. And I guess let me pause and ask, are you funded on property taxes, or do y'all have a separate budget system for education?
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. I apologize. So New York is very interesting. We actually have a hybrid system. So we are partially funded by property taxes and then partially through the general city budget. But are you saying that the development is good because it increases the taxes and helps the schools? Is that?
Well, and I guess I'm just completely extrapolating from this, but I know for us, at least for myself and my neighbors, we go, okay, yes, we pay more property taxes. Yes, our property values are going up. Yes, our insurance is going up. But then we look at the flip side of that, especially now that I have a child, but I'm funding education. I'm at least leaving something. I'm leaving a legacy in the education system. So, and again, I don't know your system well enough, and I don't know all of your issues there in Harlem. I do know, just back to the history of Harlem, I don't know if y'all can tell, but I'm white. So we were taught to fear Harlem. The first time I went to New York City, I was telling Kim, and I walked through Harlem, I thought I was supposed to be terrified. And I found that it was one of the most amazingly accepting, very calm, very enjoyable places. And don't get me wrong, I love Manhattan, I love Times Square, but I really enjoyed walking through, seeing the older properties, seeing the people, seeing just the activities on the street, the kids playing hopscotch, the things that I saw. So changing the image of Harlem is a great thing, But I don't know. I guess I'm trying to find that balance between you need to fund your schools to solve all these other issues, because I think if your children are educated and educated well, they're going to grow up to be active voters. They're going to be able to support themselves and their families. And I understand that some people get stuck in a rut. They get stuck in situations, the incarceration, there's no rehabilitation, there's no education in incarceration. But if we start at that root problem, then perhaps you can start to change into the other parts of it. And I guess that's kind of where I'm getting, is that education is the root.
Well, I definitely agree in terms of the importance of education. And in fact, part of why I'm an abolitionist and I actually believe we could have a world without jails is because I believe, and that's a long view, I understand that won't happen tomorrow, but it's because I do believe that if we start dealing with the root problems, we actually stem and prevent the violence. We actually interrupt it before it starts. And that along with de-escalation and alternatives to incarceration could lead to abolition. So I definitely agree and appreciate the emphasis on education. That being said, I don't actually think that education needs to or should be funded through property taxes. And I do have this larger view of I guess going back to democratic socialism, I have this larger view that the money should come from those who have the most. So in New York City, we have approximately 1 million millionaires. That's a lot of money. There's way too much money here for people to be homeless or to be hungry. There's way too much money here for us not to fund the schools.
Yeah.
There's just way too much money here for that, you know? And then when people start talking about Harlem specifically, I have to say I start getting really angry. I really do, because there's been literally billions stolen from this community, literally billions. Because, you know, when we start talking about the way the city has done zoning and the new developments that happen downtown, but that they steal, like projects like Hudson Yard, that they've stole financing that would have been for Harlem to do those things, you know, along with just the years of exploitation. I mean, there's been so much stolen from this community. I really don't want to hear it if like some of the property values taxes from other parts of the city go to pay for Harlem schools. I would be, you know, if we restructure the taxes and it has to come from those who make more to pay for Harlem schools, I consider that part of necessary reparations.
Yeah,
well,
I agree.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but does your tax money stay within each individual district? Or, now I know you said there's a city budget, but then your property tax portion, is it Harlem property taxes only, or are you able to pull from other areas?
So I'm saying it's a hybrid, but I'm saying that bigger picture, I would want to pull from other areas, and I would feel like that is correct. And I guess what I'm saying is that the community deserves both, that we deserve both the affordable housing and the ability to stay in the community, and also deserve full funding of the schools.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Sorry, we have like maybe 5 or so more minutes, everyone. So my mom wants to ask a question. And go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, Kristin. And first of all, you know, best of luck to you. You're doing just a great service for your community. I applaud you for that. But I'm just curious on how are you canvassing support, like financial support, in order to get elected, get your name out there? I know you talked about the posters and how you know, you spent the $300 and all that. I'm just curious on what are you doing to like get financial support or just support, just overall support?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So one of the things that we're doing are virtual house parties like this one. So Kim was kind enough to host. So I'm getting on Zooms with different groups of people and talking about my platform, talking about what it's about, and then asking people to donate if they can. That's one means. We are also doing different community fundraisers. One thing we've done is a virtual paint and sip, and we've also done a virtual open mic. And before COVID, we were doing a lot of events, in-person events, and asking people to chip in what they can. I will say I don't have big corporate donors, but I actually have the most donors of anyone running, including the incumbent's past record, because he hasn't declared yet, but going back, including that. So my campaign, while it's not necessarily a lot of money per donor, we have had over 800 donors. So there's a lot of people chipping in what they can. And over 250 of that, close to 300 of that, are people from the district. So people who like live here and are in the district. Okay. Which is a high percentage if you follow campaigns. It's a really high percentage of people giving. And so I'm very proud of that. And we're continuing to spread the word and ask for donations. Yeah.
Okay, well, Kristin, let me have your website because I'd like to support you.
Oh yeah, Mom, I'll send it to you.
Oh, okay.
I can,
yeah, definitely.
I'm gonna put the direct link in chat.
Hey, perfect.
For anyone who wants to contribute, that's the donation link. Is, every bit matters, so we definitely appreciate it. And I know some folks are not in New York, but for those who are in New York, your donation actually gets matched 8-1 by the Campaign Finance Board. Wow. So it's also, so it's an awesome program for candidates that they decide not to take any corporate donors, and you make an agreement that you're going to do grassroots fundraising, and then the city has a program that helps support basically grassroots campaigns like this one. Wow. To give us a fighting chance. It's really cool. It's a good effort. Yeah, it's a good effort.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, right. So I appreciate that, and gave me a chance to give the donation plug. So
yeah, yes, that's right. All right, so we're gonna have to wrap up unless anybody have any final thoughts. I think we're good. Kristin, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just thank you for coming, listening, learning more, and donating if you can. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in here in Zoomland and on Facebook, because I'm going to put this on Facebook as well. So again, thank you all for joining, listening, what have you. I encourage you to get involved. This is here for you to be inspired, to know what's going on in your district, in your state, in your city, knowing what's going on. Okay, how can I get more involved? Who are the people that I need to start looking at for next year or for this year? So thank you again for joining, everybody. Bye.